He thought he could intimidate her, humiliate and break her, but he didn't know who he was dealing with. It started with a routine parking lot collision, but it ended in a way he didn't expect. Write in the comments where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. The rhythmic pounding of fists against the heavy bag echoed through the nearly empty gym. Sweat dripped from Ronda's brow, her muscles burning from the relentless pace she'd set for herself. She was used to this feeling, the ache of discipline, the quiet satisfaction of pushing her body to its limits. It was routine, ingrained in her every move, every strike, every breath. Tonight had been no different. Another intense training session, another step toward keeping herself sharp and ready. She thrived on the structure, the control it gave her. As she wrapped up her session, her breathing deep and steady, she allowed herself a moment of stillness. The gym was mostly empty now, just a few stragglers finishing their workouts. She exchanged a quick nod with one of the trainers before grabbing her bag and heading toward the exit. The cool night air greeted her as she stepped outside, the contrast to the gym's heat sending a slight shiver through her. She rolled her shoulders, adjusting the strap of her duffel bag, and made her way toward her car. On the drive home, she debated whether to stop for a quick snack. She wasn't in the mood for cooking, and she could use a protein bar and some water before heading home for the night. The streets were quiet, the occasional car passing by, headlights slicing through the darkness. She spotted a small convenience store up ahead and made the decision. It would only take a few minutes. The parking lot was mostly empty, save for a few scattered cars. The fluorescent lights above cast a dull glow over the cracked pavement. Ronda pulled into a spot near the entrance, turned off the engine, and stepped out. She moved with her usual confidence, measured, purposeful, but relaxed. Inside, the store was quiet. A lone cashier stood behind the counter, lazily flipping through his phone. A couple of customers wandered through the aisles, their movements slow and unhurried. Ronda went straight to the back, grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, then made her way to the shelves, scanning for something quick to eat. A protein bar caught her eye, and she picked it up before heading to the register. As she placed the items on the counter, she felt it, a shift in the air, the weight of someone's gaze on her. It was subtle at first, just a slight tingle at the back of her neck, an instinct honed from years of combat and competition. She ignored it, paid for her items, and turned to leave. The moment she stepped outside, she spotted him. A man standing near her car, his posture tense, rigid. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a scruffy beard and a face that looked hardened by years of wear and anger. Something about the way he stood, the way his hands clenched at his sides, set off an internal alarm. She approached her car with the same steady stride, her expression unreadable, but her senses heightened. The man didn't move, didn't step aside. He was waiting. As she neared, he lifted his head slightly, his gaze locking onto hers. There was something in his eyes, something dark, something simmering. For a brief second, neither of them spoke. The parking lot seemed to shrink, the night air thick with an unspoken tension. Then he smirked. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smirk that came from someone who believed he had the upper hand, who thought he had already won some unseen battle. Ronda didn't respond. She had encountered men like him before. She knew the type. The ones who thought strength was something only they possessed. The ones who saw a woman standing alone and assumed they could dictate how the interaction would unfold. He took a step forward, deliberately closing the small space between them. His eyes raked over her, assessing, measuring. The smirk widened. Ronda remained still, her breathing slow, controlled. She knew how to handle situations like this. The key was not reacting too soon, not giving him what he wanted. His voice broke the silence, laced with a casual arrogance. It wasn't loud, but there was an edge to it, something taunting, something testing. She said nothing. Not yet. The man tilted his head slightly, as if studying her, trying to gauge if she was scared. When she made no move to react, his smirk faltered just a fraction. Then, as if deciding he was done waiting, he stepped directly into her path, his presence imposing. And just like that, the moment shifted. Ronda didn't need words to know where this was going. She had seen this pattern before. First, the words. Then, the attempt at intimidation. And then, if unchecked, the escalation. She could already feel the fight brewing. The space between them was non-existent now. The man standing too close, his body language an unmistakable display of dominance. Ronda didn't move, didn't react, just met his gaze with the same calm, unreadable expression she always carried into a fight. She had no intention of engaging in whatever twisted game he thought he was playing, but she also wasn't about to step back. That wasn't who she was. That had never been who she was. The man's smirk returned, slower this time, as if her lack of response amused him. He had expected fear, hesitation, a sign that she was intimidated, but Ronda gave him nothing. That only seemed to fuel his irritation. His eyes flickered over her again, scanning, evaluating, like she was some sort of puzzle he couldn't quite figure out. When she still didn't respond, he exhaled sharply, the breath coming out more as a scoff. His stance shifted slightly, his weight settling onto his heels, an unconscious sign that he was getting ready to move. She noticed every detail. The slight tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers flexed before curling into fists. Years of training had sharpened her instincts to a razor's edge, and right now, every single one of them was screaming that this man was dangerous. Not because he was stronger, but because he believed he was. The words came next, sharp, condescending. They carried the same weight as a feint in a fight, testing her reaction, seeing if she would flinch. He threw insults like punches, each one laced with irritation, as though her refusal to acknowledge his authority was some kind of personal offense. Ronda remained silent. Not because she was ignoring him, but because she knew exactly how this kind of confrontation played out. She had seen it too many times before. If she reacted now, it would give him exactly what he wanted, a justification, an excuse to push further. But then he stepped in front of her, fully blocking her way. That changed everything. The air between them shifted, heavy with the kind of tension that only came before violence. His smirk was gone now, replaced by something else, something colder. His breathing had quickened just slightly, his pupils blown wide with whatever cocktail of emotions was driving him forward. Anger, frustration, a twisted sense of entitlement. She watched his body language, analyzing every movement with the precision of someone who had spent years studying opponents in the cage. His stance was unstable. Too much weight on one leg, his balance favoring his dominant side. If he moved, he would telegraph it. If he attacked, she would see it before it even happened. And then he did exactly what she had anticipated. It started with a shove, sudden and forceful. His palm slammed against her shoulder, a deliberate attempt to knock her off balance. Ronda barely shifted. That seemed to throw him off. He had expected her to stumble, maybe even fall back. But she stood firm, her body absorbing the impact with ease. The flicker of confusion that crossed his face lasted less than a second before it twisted into something uglier. The next move was more aggressive. His hand shot out again, this time with more force, his fingers curling as if he meant to grab her. That was his second mistake. Ronda's body reacted before her mind had even finished processing the attack. Years of instinct kicked in, her movements fluid, precise. She caught his wrist before he could make contact, twisting it sharply, her grip unyielding. The man let out a sharp grunt, his entire body jerking in response to the unexpected pain. His free hand came up fast, swinging toward her face in a sloppy, rage-fueled attempt to hit her. She ducked. The punch sailed past her head, leaving him momentarily exposed. That was all she needed. Before he could recover, Ronda shifted her weight, stepping in close as she hooked her foot behind his leg. In one swift motion, she swept him off balance, his body twisting as he was yanked forward. And then he was falling. The impact was harsh, the sound of his body hitting the pavement sharp in the quiet parking lot. He let out a strangled noise, a mix of surprise and pain, his breath knocked from his lungs. For a second, he just lay there, dazed, struggling to process what had just happened. People had started to notice now. The few customers in the parking lot turned their heads, some already pulling out their phones. The atmosphere shifted again, the weight of multiple eyes now on them. Ronda didn't move, didn't press the attack. She simply stood there, watching, waiting. The man groaned, rolling onto his side, his face contorted with disbelief. He looked up at her, eyes wild, furious. He still didn't get it. He thought this was over, but it wasn't. Because he wasn't finished yet. And neither was she. The cold pavement bit against his palms as he pushed himself up, breath still ragged from the impact. His mind was racing, trying to process how he had ended up on the ground. His body screamed in protest, a sharp pain shooting through his elbow from where he had landed wrong. He wasn't used to this, wasn't used to being put down, especially not by someone he had already decided was weaker than him. That was the problem. He had decided something about her before even knowing who she was. Ronda didn't move. She stood over him, her posture loose but ready, her breathing steady and calm. Her expression hadn't changed. There was no satisfaction, no anger, no fear. She was simply waiting, observing, deciding whether he was going to make the mistake of trying again. He had a choice. He could walk away, but men like him never walked away. His pride was wounded, his sense of control shattered, and he couldn't stand it. The murmurs from onlookers only made it worse. A few of them had their phones out, recording. He saw them out of the corner of his eye. Strangers watching, judging. A man like him couldn't allow this moment to exist. He had to erase it, had to take back control. His body surged forward before his mind even finished rationalizing the decision. He lunged, hands reaching for her, fingers curling into fists, driven by frustration and a desperate need to make her regret humiliating him. Ronda saw it all before it happened. His footwork was wrong, his weight was too far forward, his attack fueled by emotion rather than skill. It was predictable, sloppy. She didn't step back. She stepped in. Her movements were sharp, deliberate. She caught his arm in midair, redirecting his momentum and twisting his wrist as she turned. The pain was immediate, a sharp jolt shooting through his arm as his own force worked against him. His knees buckled slightly, his body instinctively trying to compensate for the sudden shift. Before he could react, before he could try to pull away, she moved again. A pivot, a grip adjustment. A sudden, brutal takedown. His body hit the pavement a second time, harder than before. His skull bounced against the unforgiving asphalt, and this time he didn't try to get up right away. His vision blurred at the edges, his limbs unresponsive for a moment. The air felt different now. The energy in the parking lot had changed. The spectators weren't just watching anymore, they were engaged. Some were murmuring, some whispering in disbelief. The man groaned, rolling onto his back, blinking against the dizziness. The fight had been drained out of him in a matter of seconds. He wasn't built for this. He was built for intimidation, for throwing his weight around, for relying on people backing down. But she hadn't backed down. She hadn't cowered or pleaded or given him a reason to justify what he had done. She had just ended it, efficiently and without hesitation. Ronda exhaled slowly, her hands relaxing at her sides. She knew what came next. The man, still lying on the ground, let out a low, frustrated growl. He tried to roll over, to push himself up again, but this time there was no real fight left in his movements. He looked up at her, eyes still burning with resentment, but something else had settled beneath it now. The realization that he had lost. For the first time there was hesitation in the way he moved. His breaths came fast, uneven. He glanced around at the people watching, his face reddening further as he realized how many of them had their phones aimed at him. He had thought this was a private moment, something he could control. Now it was something else, something public, something he had no power over. Ronda waited, giving him a final opportunity to make the right choice, to walk away while he still could. And for a moment, it looked like he might. Then he snarled, his pride overriding his common sense, and his hand darted toward his pocket. That was it. She didn't wait to see what he was reaching for. She didn't give him the benefit of the doubt. She moved. A sharp step forward, a quick strike to his forearm, knocking his hand away before it could close around whatever he had been reaching for. His fingers spasmed from the impact, whatever object he had grabbed tumbling from his grasp onto the pavement with a sharp metallic clatter. A knife. The sight of it sent a ripple through the watching crowd. Someone cursed under their breath. Someone else took a step back. Ronda barely glanced at it. She was already in motion, already closing the distance, already shutting down any chance he had at continuing this fight. Her knee came up, a calculated strike to his chest, knocking him fully onto his back again. The breath left his lungs in a violent gasp, his body seizing up for a moment. Then she was on him, shifting her position, locking his arm into an unbreakable hold. His body jerked, struggling against the pressure. It was useless. This was over. This should have been over a long time ago. A few feet away, a voice cut through the tension. Someone had called the police. The man beneath her let out a wheezing, breathless growl, his head lolled to the side, his body spent. He had no fight left, just anger, frustration, and a growing understanding that there was no coming back from this. Ronda adjusted her grip slightly, keeping him pinned as the distant wail of sirens broke through the quiet night. The wail of sirens cut through the night air, drawing closer with every passing second. The once silent parking lot was now alive with hushed murmurs, the scattered bystanders exchanging glances, shifting their weight from foot to foot, some still holding up their phones. A few had already started backing away, knowing that whatever came next was no longer a simple altercation. It had escalated beyond that. Ronda remained where she was, keeping the man pinned beneath her, her grip firm but controlled. His body was still tense, his chest rising and falling in uneven bursts, but the fight had long since left him. His limbs had gone slack, his jaw clenched so tight that the veins in his neck stood out. He wasn't struggling anymore. There was nowhere left to go, nothing left to do. He had lost. Red and blue lights flashed against the surrounding buildings as the police cruisers pulled into the lot. The first car came to a sharp stop near the scene, doors swinging open almost instantly. The officers moved with purpose, hands hovering near their holsters as they quickly assessed the situation. Two of them locked eyes on Ronda, their gazes flicking down to the man beneath her, then to the knife lying a few inches away on the pavement. "Step back," one of them ordered, voice sharp, authoritative. Ronda complied immediately, releasing the hold and rising to her feet in one fluid motion. She took a deliberate step back, raising her hands slightly, not in surrender, but in a universal sign that she wasn't a threat. She had been in enough high-stress situations to know how these things worked. The last thing she needed was for an already tense moment to spiral out of control. The man on the ground groaned, rolling onto his side, one arm wrapping around his ribs. His face was twisted with a mix of pain and barely contained rage. He didn't look at Ronda this time. He kept his gaze locked on the pavement, jaw clenched, shoulders shaking with frustration. The officers moved in quickly. One of them bent down, kicking the knife out of reach before securing it in an evidence bag. Another positioned himself between Ronda and the man, his stance rigid, as if expecting the situation to reignite at any second. A third officer, a woman with a no-nonsense expression, stepped toward Ronda. Her eyes scanned her quickly, taking in the lack of injuries, the calm way she carried herself. There was a flicker of recognition in her gaze. She knew who Ronda was. "What happened here?" the officer asked, her tone steady but firm. Ronda kept her voice just as level, recounting the events with precision. She told them about the initial confrontation, about how the man had blocked her path, about the escalation, the physical attack, the takedown. She explained that she had only acted in self-defense, that she had not thrown the first strike, that she had only subdued him when he attempted to harm her. As she spoke, the officer's eyes remained locked on her, searching for any cracks in her account. But there were none. Ronda had nothing to hide. Meanwhile, another officer turned to the gathering crowd, addressing them with a quick, authoritative question. "Did anyone see what happened?" There was a beat of silence. Then someone spoke up. A woman, holding her phone, stepped forward slightly. "I got most of it on video," she said. That changed everything. The officers immediately moved to collect evidence, asking the bystanders who had recorded footage to provide their clips. Phones were handed over, footage reviewed. The truth of what had happened was right there, unfiltered, undeniable. It showed everything: the man's aggression, the initial shove, the attempted punch, the takedown, the moment he had gone for the knife. It didn't take long for the officers to reach a decision. The man was pulled to his feet, his arms twisted behind his back as handcuffs snapped into place. His face twisted in fury, but there was nothing he could do now. He struggled just for a second, then stopped. He knew it was pointless. "You're under arrest for assault and attempted assault with a deadly weapon," one of the officers stated, his voice even. "You have the right to remain silent." "I didn't do anything," the man suddenly exploded, his voice raw, desperate. "She attacked me. She set me up. This is bullshit." The officer continued reading him his rights, unmoved by his protests. Ronda didn't flinch either. She had seen this reaction before. The refusal to take responsibility, the desperate attempt to twist the narrative, to rewrite what had happened. But there were witnesses. There was video. The evidence didn't lie. The man's words grew more frantic as he was led toward the patrol car. He thrashed once, then again, but the officers kept him firmly under control. His eyes finally snapped to Ronda, burning with a venomous glare. "You think you can just do this? You think you can get away with this?" His voice was hoarse, his breath coming in ragged bursts. "This isn't over. You'll see." Ronda met his glare with an expression of pure indifference. She didn't react, didn't acknowledge the threat. He wasn't worth her energy. The door of the patrol car slammed shut. The shouting was muffled now, his voice barely audible over the hum of the city. One of the officers, the same woman who had spoken to Ronda earlier, turned back to her. There was something different in her expression now. A small nod, almost imperceptible, a silent acknowledgement. "You're free to go," she said simply. Ronda nodded once. She didn't thank them. She didn't need to. This was how it should have ended. This was justice. As the officers finished their work, collecting final statements, dispersing the last of the bystanders, Ronda finally turned toward her car. The tension in her shoulders eased slightly. The night had shifted back to something quieter. The air was still cool, the neon lights still flickering above, the world still moving forward. She slid into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel, taking one last steady breath before starting the engine. She hadn't planned for any of this. She hadn't expected to end her night in a parking lot confrontation, but she also hadn't let it change her. She had walked into this moment as herself, and she had walked out of it the same way. The low hum of the engine filled the quiet space of her car as Ronda sat there for a moment, fingers still wrapped around the steering wheel. The flashing red and blue lights reflected in the side mirror, casting shifting shadows across the pavement. The distant murmur of police voices and radio chatter drifted through the air as they finished processing the scene. She could still see the squad car where they had placed him, the aggressive man now reduced to a caged animal. His earlier rage had been silenced, his shouts fading into the background as the weight of reality settled over him. Ronda exhaled, long and slow, letting her muscles unwind as the adrenaline finally began to dissipate. She had spent years conditioning herself for high-stakes moments, trained her body and mind to react with precision under pressure. But even now, sitting here in the aftermath, she could feel the echoes of the confrontation reverberating through her. She rolled her shoulders, stretching out the lingering stiffness, then glanced at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her face was calm, impassive, but her eyes were sharp, still assessing, still watching. She wasn't shaken. She wasn't afraid, but she was thinking. This wasn't the first time she had encountered someone like him. It probably wouldn't be the last. The kind of man who mistook intimidation for power, who thought his size, his presence, his anger gave him some inherent right to take what he wanted, to push someone down just because he could. Tonight, he had picked the wrong person. She let out another slow breath, shaking her head slightly. The truth was, most women didn't get that chance. Most wouldn't have had the training, the experience, the instinct to react the way she had. Most wouldn't have been able to stop him before he had the opportunity to do something worse. That thought sat heavier than anything else. She knew what people would say. Some would call her lucky. Others would try to justify his actions, spin some excuse about a bad day, about misplaced frustration. There would be those who said she should have just walked away. Let him have his moment. Let him feel in control. That wasn't how she lived. That wasn't who she was. She had built herself to stand her ground, to not just endure, but to fight back. Her mind drifted back to the moment he had reached for the knife. The way his face had twisted with desperation, the way his hands had moved without thought, pure instinct driving him forward. If she hadn't reacted the way she had, she pushed the thought away. It didn't matter. What mattered was that she had reacted. And she had won. The flashing lights in her mirror dimmed as the police car carrying the man pulled out of the parking lot. He was gone, for now. She had no doubt he would try to spin his own version of events, try to paint himself as the victim. Maybe he'd find a lawyer willing to fight for him. Maybe he'd try to twist the narrative to make himself seem less like the aggressor and more like the one who had been wronged. It didn't matter. There were witnesses. There was video. And most importantly, there was the truth. She reached for the gear shift, ready to drive away to put this night behind her, but her hand hesitated for just a moment. This wasn't just about tonight. It wasn't just about her. She thought about the other women out there who had found themselves in similar situations. The ones who hadn't had her strength, her skill, her training. The ones who had been left with nothing but fear and bruises and the knowledge that the world wasn't built to protect them. She knew she couldn't change the world overnight, but she could make damn sure she never let herself become a silent bystander to it. The engine rumbled softly as she pulled out of the parking lot, her movements smooth, deliberate. The street stretched ahead of her, empty and quiet, the neon glow of city lights painting long shadows across the pavement. She had walked into that fight as herself, and she had walked out the same way. But now she carried something else, a reminder, a responsibility. And next time, if the world tried to push back, she would be ready. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future content. Check out our other videos for more stories like this, and feel free to share this video with others. Thanks for watching.